Good evening. I'm political editor Dennis Welch, and this is Politics Unplugged. There are 59 days until November 3rd. This past week, both President Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden visited Kenosha, Wisconsin. The president brought his law and order message. Biden vowed to fight for racial justice. In the midst of it all, I was able to talk one-on-one with the Democratic nominee for this interview you'll only see here on Politics Unplugged. Former Vice President Joe Biden and the current Democratic nominee for President of the United States joining us here today. Now, Mr. Biden, I know your time is short, so let's just get right to this. I want to talk to you about like the civil unrest, the social unrest we've seen over the past week, particularly in Portland, Oregon, where a member of what has been reportedly a right-wing group was shot and killed over the weekend. Now, since then, President Trump has ripped into the mayor there. He's criticized the handling of this situation there. Now, I know that you have condemned violence of any kind. So what I want to know is how would a President Biden handle the situation we're in right now, because this country likely going to still be very divided after the November election?
Well, first of all, the way I do is I try to bring people together, not try to rile people up. The president does nothing but pour gasoline on the fire that's going on. And whether it's in Kenosha or whether it's in Portland, anyone who engages in using ammunition, live ammunition, to take another person's life should be tried, should be arrested, and the facts should come forward. It's as simple as that. Violence is violence. People have a right to peacefully protest. They do not have a right to engage in violence, burning, looting, and the idea that you won't condemn those who are inciting violence as well, like the right-wing guys who are going along, I guess, shooting paintballs. Doesn't justify that person being shot, but it is part of pouring fuel on the fire. The president should condemn both.
Yeah, and this president has been quick to really criticize and go after the anti-fascists there on the left, not so much on the right. Where do you think the greatest threat to the country is coming from today? Is it the left or these right-wing groups?
Donald Trump. That's where it's coming from. Look, from the moment he entered the presidency, he came down that escalator saying he's going to get rid of these Mexican rapists. And you saw what happened when those neo-Nazis came out of the fields carrying torches in Charlottesville, their veins bulging, carrying Nazi flags. And a young woman was killed. The president was asked what to do. He said there were very fine people on both sides. No president has ever said anything like that. The failure when he went up to Kenosha, not to condemn what happened in terms of the killing up there, not to make a case that, in fact, it didn't matter what the source of the violence was. It's all wrong, whether it comes from the left or the right. The words of a president matter. They matter. The president should be trying to bring people together, talk about peace, talk about security, talk about making sure that we keep people safe. And one of the ways to start keeping people safe, whether it's in Arizona or whether it's in Oregon or whether it's in the state of Wisconsin, is to make sure you get the coronavirus under control. Make sure you deal with the things that are really affecting people's lives.
And do you think this president is stoking this kind of social unrest right now because he thinks he can gain politically from this?
Well, his former spokesperson, Kellyanne Conway, said, and I'm paraphrasing, we benefit from violence and disorder and all that's going on. That's makes it have a clear choice. Look, he's hardly spoken at all about the coronavirus. The fact that 6 million people have contracted it, that we're over 180,000 dead, that he has not put forward a plan at all. Behind me, I just did a school reopening effort, how we deal with reopening our schools, which is a matter of public safety as well. What has he done? He has no plan, nothing. It's all about trying to distract and move people from focusing on his failure to do his job.
Now, speaking of the coronavirus, obviously I want to ask you a little bit about that. I know that you have proposed maybe a 3-month mandatory mask mandate. Do you favor, a stronger federal response? This current administration has really handed off a lot of the responsibility to the local governors. I know the governor here in Arizona, Doug Ducey, has been very thankful of that, to get that kind of authority to handle the response. Sounds like you might want a stronger federal, response to this. And do you trust the governors to handle what's best for their states?
Well, I hope we could trust the governors, but here's the deal. The federal government, there's a constitutional issue whether the federal government could issue such a mandate. I don't think constitutionally they could, so I wouldn't issue a mandate. But I'd carry my mask with me everywhere I go. I'd set an example. I'd make sure that And I understand what's happening. You see what's happening in your state. The numbers are going down because local authorities have taken the responsibility of issuing mandates in their cities and the counties. And fewer people are showing up without masks. The public is taking note of what, in fact, increases the prospect of the virus coming down. And so we need basic social responsibility. And those who talk about my freedom to wear a mask, well, what about your patriotism to protect your neighbor from getting sick because you may be communicating the virus? I think this is such a selfish way to approach things. It's about making sure the public is safe and secure. And that is a local decision, but there should be national standards laid out as to how it should be gone about. You can't mandate that, but to set the example of what need to be done.
One last question, though, Mr. Biden. I know your time is short. People in Arizona are wondering, when are you going to come here and visit?
I'm going to come and visit you, I promise you, based particularly on the fact that the welcome seems to be pretty strong based on the polling data. But all kidding aside, I hope to be there, but I'm going to do it responsibly. I'm not going to do what the president does. I've said I would set an example, and I will show up and make sure that I am setting the example of the way in which we should deal with this coronavirus, social distancing and the like. And we're going to be doing a lot of that from this now through the election. But I'm going to listen to what the scientists and the docs tell me.
All right. All right. That's all the time I guess we have. Joe Biden, the former vice president and current Democratic nominee for president. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And coming up on Politics Unplugged, I'm talking to our panel to break down this new poll on the race for the White House here in Arizona. That's in just a few minutes. Now to a variable in the 2020 race for the White House that no one saw coming, at least when we started this year, and that is Kanye West. On Thursday, a judge sided with an Arizona man who is asking to bar the hip-hop artist from appearing on the state's November ballot. West had until Friday to turn in 40,000 signatures. He submitted 58,000. Rashawn Clayton accuses Kanye of serving as an election spoiler, trying to steal votes from Biden. Clayton's attorneys say independent presidential candidates can appear on Arizona's ballot only if they are registered with a recognized party. They say that West isn't qualified to run because he's a registered Republican. West's legal team is expected to appeal the ruling. And the NBA and WNBA teams are opening their arenas to use as voting locations in the November election. One problem for the Suns and the Mercury, Talking Stick Resort Arena is undergoing a renovation right now and isn't available. The teams announced they will use the Veterans Memorial Coliseum instead. That's on the state fairgrounds at 19th Avenue in McDowell. The Coliseum was the former home of the Suns until they moved downtown in 1992. And last month, the group Our Voice, Our Vote Arizona launched a new black-led voter movement and political action committee here in our state aimed at getting people out to vote in November. And joining me now is one of the people leading that operation, State Representative Reginald Boulding, a Democrat from Phoenix. Thank you very much for joining us here for a few minutes, Mr. Boulding. Let's start by having you explain, what exactly are you guys trying to accomplish this year?
Thanks, Dennis, for having us. Our Voice, Our Vote Arizona's mission is to make sure that we get more people to the polls. Quite frankly, you've had underrepresented groups, you've had people of color, you've had women, you've had millennials that have historically not had access to the polls and may have lacked information to get them there. So what we're doing is we're ensuring that they have all of the information that they need about their candidates, and they have access to the polls, and we'll be making phone calls, knocking on doors, sending text messages, doing whatever we can to make sure that they turn out and vote.
And is there any concern right now that this campaign is increasingly becoming even more and more negative, may suppress voter turnout, that people just decide to stay home?
One of the biggest fears that we had was that with the pandemic, there is the possibility that people have so much that's going on in their lives that voting may have not been at the top priority. But what we know is that the pandemic is directly connected to what's happening with regards to the political response to COVID. And whether it's the president encouraging people to vote twice, or whether it's the president saying that the mail-in ballot system is not going to actually work, we know that there's real information that people need to know. And we truly believe that once we get in front of them and have that conversation with them, they'll likely vote.
And so tell us a little bit about the tactics here, the group. How do you go about contacting these voters, identifying these voters? You're going to be calling them, you're going to be knocking on doors. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so for us, one of the things that we know is that you have to make sure that you're connecting with voters multiple times in order for them to not only know when the election day is, but for them also to have a strong understanding of the candidates that are running for office. Our voice, our vote, we truly believe that the community should have the voice, and community should pick candidates, candidates shouldn't pick communities. And in order to build community power, you have to have people who are informed. So we're literally going door to door. Obviously, it's COVID, so we're wearing face masks and face shields and standing 6 feet apart, having those conversations. We're making phone calls, and we're also sending text messages. Thus far, we've already made over 400,000 phone calls, and we'll be knocking on nearly 200,000 doors. So we are well prepared. We are ready to make sure that the most important election in our lifetime is one in which people have the ability to actually participate.
Yeah, and talk to us a little bit about the information you are giving to these voters. Obviously, in this pandemic, a lot of people are being encouraged to vote by mail. Obviously, the Republican president here, Donald Trump, has raised issues, raised questions about mail-in voting. Is this something that a lot of people you are contacting are asking you about, or is this some information you're providing them? Because even the governor here has said, like, look, you know, Arizona has had mail-in voting for a long time, and he trusts the system here.
You know, we do trust the vote by mail system. We believe that when you sign up to have your vote by mail, you have several weeks to make a decision, and you have, several weeks to get those ballots in. What we are encouraging people is to turn in their ballots by mail as soon as possible. Because we do know that there is that chance that you can have election day where we won't know the results on election day because the overwhelming number of ballots that are either dropped off at the polls or those that are coming in. So we are 100% encouraging people to vote by mail, but we're also, for those individuals who aren't comfortable with the system, we are asking them to go and drop those at any emergency polling location that they have. We want to make sure that safety is thought about, and we want to also make sure that people have their voices heard.
Hey, Mr. Bolden, this is a final question here for this segment here. Talk to us. You guys have been doing this for a little over a week now. What's the response been from the people you're contacting?
You know, what we call it is contact rates, right? So the contact rate that we're having with voters in our community has surpassed any other election cycle that we've seen thus far. And I believe that's twofold. One is people, they are likely to engage in conversations when they know that someone is wearing actually COVID-related material, safety material, PPE, for lack of a better word. And then also people have been in their homes for so long and they may have not had an opportunity to have interaction with people to talk about this issue. So it's been a great contact rate. We're getting great results. And I truly believe that our voice, our vote, and our partners, part of the Me AZ coalition, will make the difference in this election cycle.
All right. Thank you. That's State Representative Reginald Bolden on his Get Out to Vote efforts here this year in 2020. Thank you very much. But up next, controversy surrounding the Suns Stadium renovation and the Phoenix City Council, how an allegation by the team's former general manager has become another black eye on a franchise struggling to gain back fans. And welcome back to Politics Unplugged. A Phoenix City Councilman is calling on the state attorney general to investigate the Phoenix Suns over allegations of bribery. The allegations are tied to last year's council vote on $230 million in renovations of Talking Stick Arena.
In a letter sent to the Attorney General's office, Councilman Sal DeCiccio suggests that campaign contributions curried favor with two members of the council in 2019, including one who switched her no vote to a yes. These accusations come a week after DeCiccio criticized NBA players who protested for social justice, which prompted former Suns general manager Ryan McDonough to tweet, "The only thing worse than a crooked, racist politician who takes money to vote a certain way is a crooked, racist politician who still takes the money but does not vote that way. And before you reply, Sal DeCiccio, remember this, I was there and I have receipts." McDonough was no longer working for the Suns at the time of the vote and has since walked back the scandalous bribery accusations he made about DeCiccio.
The ex-general manager of the Suns was the insider that should know, could have known that these things were going on. Even though he wasn't around that time, he would know if these types of things were happening. And that's why I think it's critical what he did.
We reached out to the Suns and the AG's office, but they did not immediately respond to our requests.
And this is just the latest in a long list of controversies surrounding the Suns franchise. Here for commentary on the state of the Suns is Arizona Family Sports Director Mark McClune.
Yeah, Dennis, the worlds of sports and politics colliding once again. We thought maybe that dark cloud that had been over the Suns since 2010 was starting to dissipate after an 8-0 finish to the regular season inside the NBA bubble in Orlando, and Devin Booker starting to emerge as a superstar. But that cloud started to come back when former GM Ryan McDonough joined Twitter and started tweeting and really going after the franchise, walking down memory lane, as well as we were reminded at the time when owner Robert Sarver put goats, live goats, in his office to try to encourage McDonough to find the greatest player in team history. You could argue he found that in Devin Booker, but then the Eric Bledsoe soap opera where Bledsoe tweeted that he wanted out of town and then recanted and said he just wanted out of a hair salon, Goran Dragic forcing his way out of town. And McDonough drafted DeAndre Ayton, so this has drudged up all the frustration about Luka Doncic going to Dallas. And the list goes on and on and on for a franchise that hasn't made the playoffs in a decade since Steve Nash walked out of the door. Again, we thought that cloud was starting to dissipate with the way the team had played, but this is definitely not the narrative that the Suns want going into the offseason with so much goodwill built up with the way the team played in Orlando. One thing is for sure, it's always entertaining and interesting with this franchise and sort of a soap opera. The Suns will likely not be back on the court until December at the earliest as the NBA tries to sort out the COVID situation, and Ryan McDonough's Twitter account is now a must follow. Dennis, back to you.
And I'm bringing in our panel to talk about a new poll out on the presidential race here in Arizona in reaction to our interview with Joe Biden. That's next on Politics Unplugged. Well, I have one last question, though, Mr. Biden. I know your time is short. People in Arizona are wondering, when are you going to come here and visit?
I'm going to come and visit you, I promise you, based particularly on the fact that the welcome seems to be pretty strong based on the polling data.
And welcome back to Politics Unplugged. Earlier in the show, in my interview with Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden, he'd commented on the polling numbers coming out of Arizona. Here's the latest we've seen. It's a Fox News survey released on Wednesday. Amongst likely voters, Biden holds a 9-point advantage over President Trump. And if you look at the issues, the president holds a lead in only one category, the economy. And even there, he holds a slim 1-point advantage. But on the issues like dealing with China, it's a virtual tie. Biden up 1 point. This is an issue that President Trump has tried to hit the former vice president hard on, running several ads trying to link Biden to China. On policing and criminal justice, an issue that has been pushed into the spotlight because of protests and unrest that have been seen since George Floyd's death in July, Biden holds a 5-point advantage. And then on the issue of the coronavirus, the former vice president holding a whopping 17-point advantage over President Trump. And welcome back to Politics Unplugged. It's time to talk it out. I'm joined by Republican political consultant Marcus DelOrtino and Democrat Roy Herrera. Marcus, want to start with you. You just heard some of the numbers from that Fox poll. What are you making of that?
Well, it seems to be an outlier. These numbers are very large comparative to the previous polls coming into this, where you see 4- and 5-point spreads. This is a double-digit lead. My quick analysis and looking at the survey is there's a large portion of the people that were surveyed on cell phones. There's a science behind polling, as you might imagine, in statistics, in a process. I have a tough time buying this one wholeheartedly, and I think that we're going to see, polling was unpredictable at best, in the last election. And I think we're going to see a continuation of that. And frankly, I think we're going to see going in the worst possible direction on polling. People aren't picking up their phones. People don't want to answer questions. So I wouldn't rely too heavily on polls and surveys just on first brass. Plus, you have a bunch of pollsters who all want to make the news cycle.
Yeah, and always it's good advice never to put too much stock into one poll. But, you know, the same poll also polled the U.S. Senate race here in Arizona. And, Roy, I want to ask you a little bit about this. It shows that Martha McSally is trailing by 17 points. Now, I am skeptical that she would be trailing by 17 points in Arizona at this point. What about you? You buying or selling that number and that poll?
Well, I like that poll very much. But, of course, you know, there's been some fluctuations in the polls. I think what we can all agree on is that at this point, Mark Kelly is ahead of Martha McSally. That has been the consistent polling result, you know, that we've seen from pollsters across the board. And so that's obviously very concerning. I mean, we're getting up to Labor Day now. If it's anywhere near that kind of margin, if that poll is accurate at all, then she is in deep, deep trouble. And as we've talked about before, I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, the national Senate Republicans sort of focus on other states. And similarly, you know, with the Joe Biden numbers, you know, again, I think we've seen some pretty consistent polling of having him ahead here. And, you know, my prediction before the party conventions is that we'd largely be in a place like we were before. And I think we're seeing some polling that has actually shown that Joe Biden has actually increased his lead slightly nationally and here in Arizona. So that's very concerning for Republicans.
Yeah, I just want to go back to Marcus now. 17 points there. Again, I am highly skeptical of that. I think it is fair to say, but based on all the polling right now, that Martha McSally is trailing, but not by that much, right?
I can concur with that statement. I think it's close. You know, if I had to pick a number out of thin air, I'd say, you know, about 5 points. But remember, the Senate Republicans are also putting $11 million into this race, announced this week. They wouldn't do that if they thought that Martha McSally was behind by 17 points. So even they know that it's worth putting $11 million towards this race.
Mm-hmm. And just let me stick with you real quick, Marcus. I want to get reaction from both of you. We're running a little bit low on time here, but I want to ask you, you know, you saw that interview with Joe Biden. Do you think he's going to be able to sustain this and carry Arizona with the message he's bringing right now?
I mean, we'll have to see. The Joe Biden I saw 2 years ago at John McCain's funeral is very different than the Joe Biden I'm seeing today. You know, it's funny because all these people that are supporting Joe Biden were all the people that said John McCain was too old to be president. And I'm looking at Joe Biden right now and seeing some of these gaffes, and I'm wondering if he's too old to be president. So he's going to have to get his energy level up. He's going to have to watch his gaffes. And he's going to have to concentrate on his messaging, and then he's got a chance. But it's not a foregone conclusion. I will tell you that. That's for sure.
Yeah, and what about you, Roy? What do you expect? I mean, I would expect at this point that this race is going to tighten here between in Arizona between Mr. Biden and Mr. Trump as the closer we get to November. What are you expecting?
That's very possible. I mean, that tends to happen in elections. When we get closer to the election, people tend to go home. That being said, I mean, the polling numbers that you showed earlier on the issues, again, have to be very concerning for Trump and are very good numbers for Biden here in Arizona. I mean, I do think that Arizonans are, you know, focused on the coronavirus, its effect on the economy. And when Joe Biden's leading by numbers like that on that issue, it's very difficult for Trump to make that up. And then Trump has chosen to focus a lot on this law and order message. But again, we've seen polling shows that message has largely fallen flat nationally and here in Arizona. So the messaging just isn't working for Trump. He would have to change that in some way, I think, to get closer and to win.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. But that is all the time we have tonight. But be sure to join us next week for more Politics Unplugged. Good night.